o'clock. I say we get started. You can hear me, Erika, still?
I can.
Excellent. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Dismantling Racism and Oppression in the Food System with Erika Allen. Just before we get started, some technical information. We are recording this session and it will be made available shortly after on Food Secure Canada's YouTube channel. If you want to ask questions, we'll keep the question period at the end, but please feel free to type them in the chat box that's at the bottom right corner of your screen. If you have tech issues, please type them in the chat box and we'll try to help you as best as we can. And if you're joining us by phone, please make sure that your phone is on mute. You can do that by pressing *6. So hello again, my name is Nidia Dauphin, and I am FoodShare Toronto's Food Justice Senior Coordinator. Today's webinar is presented by the Food Justice Network, which is a partnership between FoodShare Toronto and Food Secure Canada. A bit about these organizations. FoodShare Toronto is Canada's largest food security organization. And through food justice community food animation, FoodShare creates and supports local solutions to address systems of oppression and exclusion in the food system. We've made it a priority to work with communities of color, newcomers, and indigenous communities, as well as other equity-seeking groups by providing organizational resources to support community-led food access initiatives. Food justice is at the core of FoodShare's work and mandate. We facilitate empowerment and community development from the ground up, striving to improve access to good, healthy food for traditionally underserved communities. We're working to build a more democratic, just, and equitable Ontario through trainings, workshops, and community animation centered around anti-oppression. As for Food Secure Canada is a pan-Canadian alliance of individuals and organizations working together to advance food security and food sovereignty through 3 interlocking goals: zero hunger, healthy and safe food, and sustainable food systems for all. It does so by facilitating a dynamic and accessible information hub to foster democratic debate on food policy, by supporting dynamic networks to facilitate research and enhance learning and collaboration on food-related projects and campaigns, and thirdly, by advocating for food policies at the federal level that reflect the priorities of Canada's food movement. So the Food Justice Network is a recent initiative. Last November at Food Secure Canada's assembly in Halifax, the Food Justice Network met for the very first time in person, and at that time a goal was identified, which was to raise awareness about food justice in Canada. So this is why we're here today. We will be hosting quarterly informational and interactive webinars where we'll be speaking with food justice actionists doing amazing work to bring about equitable and just food systems. So right after this webinar, we will be having a teleconference meeting, and the login information will be shared in the chat box below. So today, we have the pleasure of having Erika Allen with us today. Erika Allen is a social change artist with a focus on dismantling racism and the related healing and understanding of how structural oppression impacts society. Her practice for the last 20 years has focused on community-based transformation through the food system and integration of visual and installations of urban farms that integrate food, culture, spirit, and the arts. As Chicago and National Projects Director for Growing Power, Erika has integrated creative and therapeutic techniques with food security and community development, enabling her to develop 9 urban agriculture and food system projects in the U.S. and impact policy in Chicago. She also facilitates the planning and visioning of similar projects for clients from a broad spectrum of backgrounds and environments. I had the pleasure of meeting Erika Allen in 2013, as she, along with 2 Growing Power colleagues of hers, facilitated a dismantling racism in the food system training right here in Toronto. We're working really hard to bring them back again this spring in Toronto. We will keep you posted as soon as the dates are confirmed. So without further ado, Erika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nidia, and hi, everybody. It's kind of weird to be talking without seeing anybody, but I'm hoping that today I can give you a little overview of what we mean by racism. I think that's a big part of this work, is to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what we mean by that word. And I think we're all at different levels of our journey around the meaning and understanding of what racism is, how it operates within our lives, within our work, within our organizations and communities, and have an opportunity to sort of get on the same page with what we mean by dismantling those systems. So I'm going to kind of walk you through just some of the terminology, and then wrap up with sort of next steps and how the Growing Food and Justice for All initiative was developed, why it was developed, and where we are in the journey of that initiative, and how we can partner and support the work that you all are doing. So just a little bit about Growing Power. So I have unique kind of pleasure and privilege of getting to work with my father. Part of my work in dismantling my own oppression and understanding that was kind of putting, sort of the Western perspective and sort of direction that kind of tells you to leave your family's work, go on your own, be independent, which is a very Western perspective. Traditionally, in most other cultures, you continue on within the trade, within the business that your family runs. And so I chose to embrace this tradition, and rather than starting my own organization in Chicago and doing my own thing, to return and support my father's work and to be able to build on that legacy. That was also part of my spiritual development as well, in understanding ancestors. So Growing Power took on a anti-racism component within our strategic plan, and we decided to not just do this internally, but also to build a network of other food system activists who were doing urban farms or hunger work or policy work across the US and Canada and internationally, to really form a network where we could support each other's development and understanding of all of this, and be able to come together and share best practices, successes, and then be able to problem solve together. So it's really a comprehensive network that supports that development, and supports it in a way that's not just about understanding the science of racism, which I think a lot of people, I'm sure, on this call are familiar with all the terms, or maybe not, but maybe you think you are, maybe you, I don't know where you are with your journey. But for me, it's always an ongoing practice. It's an ongoing challenge to really understand and to embody some of these principles to be an effective change agent. So, I'm not going to read through these terms, but as I'm speaking, if you could read through them, and those of you who are listening, the terms are prejudice, racial sorting, race, and racism. And, for me, when I read and understand prejudice, I'm really understanding that as sort of, it's sort of like one of the ingredients in racism, and it's not racism. So as a person of color, I can have prejudices against, let's say, people who are Italian. I have certain beliefs about that group of people. Maybe they're positive, maybe they're hostile. It's just sort of like my own belief. It's a preconceived judgment about a whole group of people. Racial sorting is really about being able to sort of, sort people. Oh, you're this, you're that. Oh, so you're like this. And psychologically, I'm inferring, I'm using my prejudices based on how I've sorted you racially. And then race, just as a classification system, has no bearings on anything real, nothing scientific. It was used to begin, creating hierarchies so that for political and economic power. So it has no basis in any kind of reality at all. And then racism is when you have your views, practices, and actions regarding humanity, based on those races. So I've decided that one group is superior to another. One group has more positive attributes than another. And I use those beliefs to create division and to create opportunities to oppress. Social and institutional power. So this is one that I think probably everyone on this call grapples with. So we all need social capital. We all need institutional power to kind of get the work done, right? So if you're doing an urban farm, or you're doing a food hub, or you're trying to put a school garden in, that's all about you're able to get things done if you're a mover or shaker, if you know people in certain positions. So when you have that kind of power, when you have access, when you have the ability to be able to influence decision makers, you have a leg up, right? You have something that I may not have, or I may have it and you not have it. And to not recognize that as not being equitable amongst racialized groups is I think tantamount to what we need to begin to look at. So when we talk about institutional power and we talk about social systems or economic systems, we're really talking about all these different pieces that when they start to come together forms something that can run itself. So the idea that having some access to institutional power and getting a leg up is not somehow connected to a system that supports those opportunities is very important to understand, because if we don't understand that, we can't really dismantle it. We can't really address it and change this equation. So if I have power, if I have prejudice, where I believe one group is better than another, or I've made certain kinds of negative judgments about a specific group, and I am able to put those into action within a system, then that equals racism. So what we say when we look at this, and this can sometimes be very challenging for folks who identify as white, and there's people of color who identify as white as well, then you really have this understanding that people of color cannot be racist. People of color can be prejudiced. People of color can be biased. People of color can be hateful and all of those things. But when we understand racism, it is about power plus prejudice. And if you are a group who does not have power, you can't be exercising racism. And this is a key to the understanding, because a lot of times people get really bogged up with this because they talk about reverse racism, they talk about, situations, little anecdotes about being treated a certain way as a white person working in a garden with, children of color and having those children be disrespectful, or all kinds of little anecdotes, and how those were reverse racism experiences. And they really are not. They are prejudicial, they're hateful, etc., but they're not racism, because racism is about this equation. So with that understanding, we can start talking about what white privilege is. And white privilege is something that is a really important part of understanding how racism exercises its power over all of us. So if you have an institution that you have access to as a white person, the assumption is that everybody has that access because I have that access. So it really is about the unspoken advantages that white people have that people of color do not have. Most white people, unless they're in maybe they enter into a community of color, or maybe in a gender scenario, most of the time don't think about, don't have to feel uncomfortable. It can move freely through any environment they choose. Often the example we use for this is going to a store, just to, let's say, a clothing store. And a person of color often will have the experience, especially if they're a young male or young female, who appears to be from an urban environment, will get followed around that store, who'll have to be very careful about, not appearing to be shoplifting. And, and there's many other anecdotes like that. So white privilege is really about having sort of privileges that are unspoken. They're things that you don't have to think about. And white supremacy is really the belief that, exactly how it sounds, that white folks are superior and should and whose worldview is the ideology, the systems, the ways that we all should speak, the culture that we all should assimilate to, and is really a pervasive way that the system continues to operate. internalized white supremacy. And this is really just about taking that concept, which is about white privilege, right? Like I can just do what I want. There's nothing really stopping me from moving through the world how I would like, and the world is my oyster. If I work hard, I can get ahead. All of those kinds of things. That everything that I have earned is because of my hard work and merit, and that if there's things that happen to me that are unfair, that's going to be I'm going to term that as reverse racism. Just that that when I do something or somebody in my racial group does something good or bad, it's about that individual. It's not about the entire group. So that's an important sort of concept to understand. Oppression. So oppression is just having authority to take advantage of somebody, in an unjust way. And when you combine oppression with a system, when you have systems that oppress groups, that is when we start having laws, customs, and practices that impact specific racial groups. Internalized oppression, much like white privilege. I keep having people come to my door, so if you see me going like this, just a moment. So internalized oppression, much like white supremacy, is the situation where you have that people of color experience, where we internalize those experiences. So white folks tend to have to deal with privilege and sort of the acceptance and identification of those systems that they just unwittingly participate in and perpetuate. People of color have to really look at how we've internalized the oppression. And this is really very much about how we feel about each other, how we feel about ourselves, how we've begun to really believe and to assimilate those attitudes within ourselves. So one is much more internalized, one is more externalized. The challenge with racism and how it operates, especially within those institutions, and it is also within the cultural sphere, is that it really requires white folks to shift, give up, challenge some of those concepts of supremacy and also of privilege. So constructed racist oppression. This is really about having a historically constructed system. It's not personal or individual. So this is something that permeates every aspect of our lives. Our personal sphere, so that's our interactions with one another, the institutions, schools, libraries, the medical system, police, the prison system, cultural lives, music, art, the way we dress. And it really is, there's the way that racist oppression and this construct really is, creates the atmosphere of discrimination, suspicion, or fear of people of color. This is most acutely experienced, at least here in the US, and I think it's the same in Canada, by young black males or young dark-skinned males. I think other people of color groups, folks of Muslim descent, I think are experiencing this as well now. Native young men. So, and it's not the like racial Olympics. It's not about one group over the other, but it's really very much looking at how those constructs help to perpetuate the system. And as a result, we have lower expectations. We see those marginalized groups having less options for employment, for education, for different economic opportunities. So it's important that we look at how these constructs, how we participate in them, and begin to identify them. Because I feel like a lot of these things are sort of invisible. Like we kind of go through our lives, the system's set up so that you're hustle bustling, You're trying to get into the system. You're trying to do better. You're trying to have economic gains. You're trying to get a degree. You're trying to keep up with the system and be part of it. And, you know, and when we start to slow down and look at those constructs and look, and there's many constructs, you're able to begin to strategically look at how you can dismantle these systems. So the way that racism, based on those, all the definitions that I've broken down, manifests are within these three spheres. And this is just an illustration to look at how we can better understand these systems and how they operate in our lives. So there's the personal level, and this is how we personally perpetuate that that people of color are inferior, white people are inherently better, and you know we see this in media. One of the best ways to illustrate this would be like standards of beauty. You know, having straight hair, having a thin body, if you're male or male identified, having a muscular physique, right? So there's certain things that are considered light skin, that are just personal ways that racism manifests. There's the institutional sphere, and this is, you know, as I've mentioned, it's just the institutions we all rely on, and which continue to perpetuate the idea of white supremacy and of white supremacy. So, you know, think about the police and profiling. Think about when I was in Toronto last, folks were telling me about, you know, some sort of like people have to carry cards, young people have to carry cards and show these cards, you know, when they're out and about, they can be stopped. So just different ways that the laws and policies of institutions perpetuate these advantages for white folks. And then the cultural, just how we kind of get used to all of these beliefs. They become normal. And, you know, they dominate our cultural biases. So all of that, those are all ways that racism manifests and in different manners. So I may personally choose to straighten my hair, try to assimilate, because I've internalized the belief that if I look a certain way, I will be able to become part of the system, right? I'll be able to be on the TV if I'm a newscaster. That happens a lot in the States with you know, women of color who will you know, change their appearance to appear more white, because otherwise they can't move forward within that industry. So just kind of looking at how, as you move through this deepening understanding of how racism operates, sort of see where you are with those expressions. Microaggressions is something that has really come to the fore. And so microaggressions are the little ways that that we all experience on a daily basis. The comments, the racial slights and slurs, you know, those are ignorant kind of comments that you hear that you kind of shrug off. If you're a white person who has you know, who's conscious of these issues, you may be with a group of white folks who make comments, and you know, they're not like horrible, but they're enough to kind of make your skin crawl or make your stomach flip, and you know, and it's those little microaggressions that a lot of people of color internalize and begin to believe on a subconscious level, which can have pretty impactful health consequences. And so this is just an image for those of you who are just people of color, 4 different women holding up a card. There's an Asian woman that's, in her microaggression was, can you see as much as white people, you know, because of your eyes? You know, another young African descent woman says, you're really pretty, ... for a dark-skinned girl. Another young woman's holding up a sign that says, you don't speak Spanish. And then the last young woman has a sign that says, what are you? And her response is human. So just kind of like the constant those constant aggressions become impact our mental health, impact our stress, cortisol levels, and just impact our overall self-esteem and our ability to cope with the stressors of life. So one of the examples of the institutional structural racism that I chose was just around health and healthcare, and just the bias around racial bias and treatment. And it found that the researchers found that doctors tended to dominate conversations with African American patients, pay less attention to their personal and psychosocial needs, and make patients feel less involved in making decisions about their health. And again, that's that white supremacy at play. That's the we know better, we know better than you. So it's all of those ways that on a micro level, these aggressions and racism manifest, but then how they manifest in the ways that we experience, healthcare within the institutions that are supposed to be serving us equally. So the question for you all and for our discussion today is, how do these systems impact our work? Are we participating and perpetuating these standards as norms? How are you complicit and why? And then recognizing your own racism and internalized oppression is not enough. And what do we do? Because a lot of times, and I experienced this with the training in Toronto, where folks were kind of looking for, okay, I'm racist. And this, I think this is from the the white identified group. Okay, I'm racist. I get it. Okay. And that was kind of it. And so the next step with that understanding is, how do you strategize around that knowledge? What are the ways that we can work together to create a different kind of system? So one of the things that we encourage everybody to do is just to talk about race. And we're all food system activists, I think, on this call, or working within the food system, and how, just having conversations about race and how race manifests within the food system. Like, if you try to do it all at once, so if we're trying to dismantle this oppressive system and understand the science of power and privilege and how its vehicle of choice is racism. And this, a lot of times groups will start fracturing because they want to talk about gender, they want to talk about sexuality, they want to just break into the other ways that people are oppressed. And we stay focused on racism, because if we deal with power and privilege, it impacts everything else. And so when we talk about dismantling racism in the food system, I quickly and sort of have this response that's pretty intense around, it's not about in the system, it's through the system, that we use the food system as sort of our vehicle to begin to address these inequities. And it's something we all do every day, right? We all eat. Many of us grow food, many of us sell food, many of us prepare that food. So if we're able to have a just food system and to do and rebuild this food system and through a food justice lens, through an anti-racist lens, it'll impact every other system within our society. That's my belief, and many others. So the mission of GFGI, again, is to dismantle racism and empower low-income and communities of color through sustainable agriculture. And we do this through the iLift. And we're talking about having an iLift in the next month and a half up in Toronto, kind of a part 2. The iLift, or intensive leadership and facilitator training, is designed to go through the concepts I just ran through, pretty quickly in the context of how heavy they really are, to really enable and support leaders to begin to have these intense dialogues, to talk about race in the food system, to sit and really heal and caucus, to, and when I say caucus, we literally separate by our racial identification and talk about the issues that we're facing and strategize how we can recover, how we can build from there. So that's something that that is really key. And that training is not like I mentioned in my last example, where folks come to a workshop, oh yes, they cry, they have a catharsis, it's a very deep experience. then they go back and it's business as usual, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're really trying to enable and support leaders to be able to have this um, ongoing tension, ongoing work, having these challenging conversations in safe spaces that folks really are able to sort of begin the journey. I've been doing this work now for 9 years, specifically under, as doing anti-racism work. I've always been doing it, but like consciously going through trainings, doing train the trainer, and I'm still learning. I'm still healing from the historic trauma, healing from the ways that I've internalized some of those things, and then having a deeper understanding for other people of color and where they're at with this and how they experience me as with someone with some privilege and with lighter skin and et cetera, et cetera. So having spaces to have those conversations and those understandings is really key. And then annual gatherings. So, the ILFs are challenging. They're very rewarding, but challenging. And then we also have opportunities to celebrate, where we're able to share our strategies, we're able to enjoy good food and celebrate. Because this is not just about, oh, it's so hard. It's just so, because it is like that. But also that we can begin to heal. We can do the healing work. We can celebrate culture. We can celebrate each other's victories and continue to build community. And I think that's a really important recipe for success. So that's where I'm going to leave it and open for questions.
Thank you so much, Erika, for fitting all this in a beautiful little nugget of information. It really is kind of a taste of what we experienced in 2013 in Toronto, and for those who had the chance to go to the annual gathering, Growing Power, I'm sure you share that feeling. So we're going to open up the floor for some questions. Somebody's asking, how do we find out more about participating in the ILIF? Specifically to this one in Toronto, everybody that signed up for this webinar will be receiving the information about subscribing or registering for the training. It's going to be late April, early May, and so we'll confirm that with you soon enough. And for other ILIFs, Erika, are there some in the works in other parts that people, if they want to drive there or travel to other locations in the U.S.?
The next ILIFT that I think we're planning on having is in September with the gathering that we'll be having in Chicago.
Chicago. Okay, great. Excellent. Somebody is asking they would like to participate. Is it possible to access materials from the training if they're not able to come in person to the training?
I mean, these terms and information are on we're revamping our website. There's a whole bunch of educational resources, and you can get these terms anywhere. It's the experience that people have in the training. So nothing that I've shared is proprietary or hard to find. It's the experience of working through within a community. And feeling it, the visceral kind of catharsis is important, I think. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly share these slides. I'm fine with that.
Excellent. Somebody's asking, what are your thoughts on racism and food in a school setting, whether a school cafeteria or elementary kids bringing bagged lunches?
I don't understand that question.
How would, maybe I'm going to try to reframe it. If I'm wrong, Ines, please retype it. But I guess the question is, how do you feel that structural racism in the food system can manifest itself in school settings, whether if it's where there's cafeteria food that is, I guess, pretty standard and not really culturally diverse, or whether it's scenarios where children have to bring their own lunches, and then you have situations where some households have less resources, and then the children may feel a certain way bringing food that is deemed not appropriate or not cool according to mainstream understanding of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more of a statement than a question. So I think that those are experiences that are situational. I think certainly if there's a cultural bias around food norms within a school environment, I've heard people of color talk about, Southeast Asian folks talk about bringing curry to school and being ashamed of it, because it smells and it was different than the bologna sandwiches that, their white peers were eating. So that's more about internalized oppression than it is about the structure. That's more of a cultural kind of manifestation. Today, before this webinar, I spoke to all the fourth graders. So today in Chicago, Growing Power carrots are being served to all the fourth graders in Chicago. So it's like 600,000 fourth graders, which is tremendous. It's a huge farm to school transaction. And so, I went and spoke to the fourth graders and talked to them about the importance of, why these carrots are special and what they mean and what compost is and vermicompost and the food system and share with them why I do this work. And they asked so many great questions and were really insightful around all of these issues in a pretty amazing ways, yes, we've already made a huge difference that these fourth graders know what all these things are. So, I mean, that to me is how you impact school lunch programs or any kind of institutionalized food system, is you have to have, it makes no sense for those of us who are doing this end of the activism, if there's not some of us who are actually growing significant amounts of food. So if you have somebody who's talking about racism in a community and is supposed to be growing food, and you go and look at the garden and there's two dried up sticks and not enough food to feed one person, that is some internalized oppression to me. That's something that's not going to change the system. So we work very hard to create experiences like that, where it is really about reframing who's growing food and what farmers, that there are farmers of color who are growing really amazing food, and that's something that we want to see, manifested throughout the system.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I remember reading from your bio that you do a lot of policy advocacy, because at the same time that we're building, I guess, an alternative and solutions to immediate needs of the community, there's also this necessity to also advocate for change so that the state takes ownership of a lot of these responsibilities that are then fallen back onto individuals who have to deal with all those barriers. So do you want to talk a bit about the advocacy work that you do in Chicago?
Sure. I'm a commissioner for the Chicago Park District. So it's a political appointment. So in the Chicago Park District, I believe, is the largest park district in the U.S. It has a $600 million budget. It has its own tax levy. So it's a pretty powerful agency. And it's one of those agencies that impacts the lives of everybody. There's a park, Chicago's full of parks, and it impacts everybody. Everybody, it's like the one agency everyone feels pretty good about because everybody gets benefits from it. So, and I believe that, during my time, I've already impacted certainly how food is being looked at within some contracts, so from a procurement level, and then also just the expansion of urban ag initiatives on basically publicly held land, which we've done historically with our work here in Chicago. We've also, through the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, have just initiated a campaign called the Good Food Purchasing Procurement campaign, where we're asking the mayor or, and all the other mayoral candidates, we invited them to support a procurement policy that would require all city contracts to have that dealt with food to purchase food from local growers and food processors, and that those local growers or food processors would have to have fair labor practices. So things like that, where you're trying to build and economic opportunities for local growers, but also differentiating those local producers, by their fair labor practices, living wage, good working conditions, etc. So just beginning to look at like, oh, and it's just really an idea. Like, why can't we? The city's spending money on this. Why they could use their buying power to support these local growers economically, but really it begins to differentiate these growers not just by the availability of product, but how they're treating their workers. So those are two that I think are really exciting opportunities.
Very inspirational. We have so many questions. Somebody's asking, can you share some of the specific challenges participants come with to you during your trainings in regards to food justice?
I think people either like have, I think, really struggle. I think especially like oppressed white people. So oppressed white people or white people who are oppressed because of a variety of different reasons. Folks perhaps who are Jewish folks because of historic, the Holocaust and ongoing oppression. Folks who are, oppressed because of their sexuality. Folks because of, their gender identities. Disabilities. I mean, there's a whole wide range of ways that the system oppresses people, and I think it can be really problematic to get solidarity when people start to fracture according to their category, right? So we really like to stick to the like power plus privilege, and know that there's nuances within all of this. And if folks can kind of get to that level, then you see some real magic happening. Also within the context of the caucuses, that can be a real struggle. Like, why are we doing this separate? Why aren't we doing this together? Without, with the understanding that the work that has to be done around dismantling racism is very different for people of color than it is for white people. It's very, very different. And there needs to be space for those strategies and that healing to happen, and then we come back together. We always come back together, but we need some time apart to really kind of break down some of those issues. Those issues. There's some kind of weird feedback.
Yeah, somebody, just if you're on your phone, remember to mute it by pressing *6. But I think you just mentioned also touches upon the intersectionality. When we're talking about intersection, when for different people, you could be queer oriented, you could be differently able, but race is never a non-factor. There's always this intersection of, let's say you have a white person that is queer, will not have the same reality as a person that is of color and is queer. That's the intersection. It's different identities coming together that drastically change your own lived experience. So whenever people feel that they can just not talk about race and something else, but we should always remember that intersections are at play. You could be queer, but that doesn't mean that every queer person has the same experience. Race is always a factor. For more questions from the audience, we have somebody that asks, do you think there are significant differences in racism between the US and Canada?
No, not just geographic. I mean, I think that was one of the big myths we had to dispel, that I literally heard from people like, pretty like, big luminaries within the movement. Oh, there's no racism in Canada. And I just remember being like, what? Like the level of denial was just so extreme. And I just looked at them and I was like, so do you think the Indigenous people of Canada would agree with you? Without getting into all of the challenges that immigrants have had, and migrant workers coming from the Caribbean being like exploited, and I was oh well, we didn't have slavery, and well, slavery by another name. So I think that it's the same. I mean, I think that the cultural manifestations may be different. I think that that what I experienced in Canada is a very polite, the politeness. I don't think it manifests a little bit differently, but the discrimination, the incarceration, the biases, everything else that we've discussed today, it's the same. And I think that that's a really important part of being able to have those conversations. And I can see from some of the other questions, like how do we start this, how do we impact this within our institutions or in our small organizations or a small town, et cetera. And it is really about, forming these legs, these spaces where folks are coming together and can really work towards a long-term trajectory of healing. So it's not just having a paper bag lunch conversation about racism and calling it a day. It's really about having deep relationships and conversations and changing policy. If you're in a position of leadership, you can change a policy. You can start hiring people at a managerial level for people of color. Simple things, like things that are kind of obvious. Like if you look at a board, you have a community organization or institution that serves people of color, and there are no people of color in the leadership roles or on the board of directors, or in any of the service positions where people are going out and providing those services and trainings and education. That's a big problem. I would call that a racist organization. They may be doing good, but those are things that can change. And then you can get into all kinds of other deeper, nuanced levels of power sharing and communication.
Mm-hmm. And I think also a big factor in Canada's racism context is that Canada has done a great job at marketing itself as an anti-racist country and at remembering its own history in a very creative way, where things are swept under the carpet, just like you were saying, enslavement never happened here. The conditions of indigenous people here is atrocious, and several UN special rapporteurs have come to Canada to attest to that. So I think it's more an issue about how it's managed to market itself and erase history. And also when we're asking about racism, there's a lot harder space for people of color to actually answer that question. Even at the training, the people who were saying that there's no racism, it wasn't really the people of color saying that, but it was just this space that people identifying as white felt comfortable answering that question without ever lived that experience or without ever knowing what it is to be a person of color in Canada. Some more questions. What is your experience with lateral violence, historical trauma, and its effects between indigenous communities and communities of color, and being able to mobilize or decolonize together?
I think the caucusing is a big part of that work. Caucuses are experiences of, they're therapeutic. You're coming together and you're meeting and discussing some of the deep challenges. So, violence in our communities it's an expression of internalized oppression. When I live in Chicago, so we have a crazy high murder rate when it's warm by young people of color that impacts everybody. The entire city has to mourn and grieve senseless murders that make no sense. And those are expressions of internalized oppression. So, for me, this work is almost as important to understand theoretically, all of this as it is to create economic development. I know that the young people who are on the news and are discussed are in a position of such hopelessness that they are behaving and acting in a way that is, it's community suicide as far as I'm concerned. So the only thing that I've come across that disrupts that is creating jobs, creating healing, holistic experiences where young people can, all people, but my focus is sort of that group that nobody really wants to deal with, where these young people can have positive experiences rebuilding their communities and earning money and able to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Another
Remember,
question,
like,
what would be a...
I don't think that the anti-racism, the food justice work, the dismantling racism work is work unto itself. It's a tool to be able to understand how to do your work better and to do it in a way that can be sustainable. So I don't have any, like, like that question is like, well, I don't do it in a separate way. It's integrated into the work. It's not isolated from the work. I mean, I'll come out of the actual farming work and do a eye lift or participate in a conversation, but I'm manifesting change through my day-to-day operations.
Mhm. And I think also the terms and the definitions that you shared are so important for communities of color and indigenous communities because, like you mentioned, a lot of these are internalized. So it's not because I'm born a black woman that I may not have internalized some form of prejudicial or racist impressions of my peers, black person. And a lot of times in these situations, we are pinned one against each other in these systems. So it does create a challenge when we can't really see the common ground in our own struggles in this system because we have internalized all these issues. So as you're saying, these definitions are so important of understanding to figure out exactly how do we heal ourselves from these things and build together because we have so many opportunities to come together because our experiences are similar in some ways, not all of them, but in some ways. Somebody is asking, what would be a safe first step when addressing white supremacy in a predominantly white audiences? How to broach the subject without scaring / pissing off white folks?
Um, I mean, I don't think there's any. I mean, you're gonna. It's never comfortable. I mean, the best
Mm-hmm.
case scenario is to pre-warn people that you're going to be having these conversations can help. But I mean, I think coming across as factual, um, non-accusatory, I think people, no matter whatever your background is, you having the finger pointed at you never feels good. But I think just factual information. And there's no way to not piss off certain people. I've had shocking experiences myself, like I've been like the wing person for other people doing anti-racism work, where I've watched just some ridiculous responses that had nothing to do with the delivery of the trainer, but had to do with that person where they are with their stuff. I think just factual, like this is white supremacy, this is white privilege, this is how racism manifests. This is what people of color experience with their internalized oppression. These are the systems that are, I mean, just breaking it down and then inviting people to kind of look at, it might help to not, have them have to point out from their own organization, because I think that's really hard for people to do. But some, like the, you know, criminal justice system, that's something that everybody pretty much can agree is biased against people of color. Just trying to make it so that it's that people can work into inviting themselves into that inquiry, that investigation within their own work. But there's no easy way to do it, But it does get easier with time. Like, I mean, it's amazing how much things have changed within these last 8 years now with Black Lives Matter and some of the really clear forms of institutionalized racism. I think it's harder for people to ignore. It's harder for people to defend and move into that. Oh, what about reverse racism? Or, oh, well, all lives matter, and sort of watering down, the really specific, targeted, murderous forms of racism that a lot of people of color are contending with. So I think that's the you kind of just put one toe at a time into that water. And I think preparing, like having a team, that's why I think the eye lift is really helpful. because it prepares you so that you're comfortable. Because sometimes it's also like, I'm going to call out all these people about their racism, my white peers, and blah, blah, blah. And meantime, like, I'm the white lady in the community garden, like, doling out the, like, resources like a power miser, right? So, yet I can turn to my white peers and, like, talk to them about how racist they are. So I think it's really important to have, like, a strategy and a team and be at a point where you're really clear about what you want to see change and have a strategy for changing it.
Mm-hmm. I really, like you're saying, embodying or internalizing this process to make sure that ourselves, we're not in our individual life reproducing these same power dynamics. And I think also something that made me think about that question too is like, whose experience is more valued when we're afraid of pissing certain people off? Because personally, if I go to a conference and people tiptoe around racism and my stuff that affect me in my everyday life as a woman of color, it will piss me off. But then will it matter as much as a white person being pissed off by acknowledging their own privilege? So a lot of times for people of color, that's just our reality. And I think it's changing a lot, with, like you were saying, with the movement, when people pay more attention, are more careful about our own experience in these spaces. Because it's stuff that we deal with just walking out, where we're dealing with like these microaggressions, these macroaggressions, but it's not like it's on people's radar whether these things, their actions are pissing us off necessarily. It's already 1:56 and there's so many more questions. Erika, thank you so much for your contributions, for your presentation. Are you up for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, which one to take? This is going to be hard. Erika, would you speak a bit about how you enact the anti-racist work you do in your daily work? I can think of some things I try to do, such as providing real facts to counter prejudicial statements. I'm sure there are other ways. Maybe at growing power in your everyday life that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, just a high level of accountability. I mean, we're really smart around, there's certain like meetings that, or that I won't go to, that like the white identified staff will go to, because they can say certain things and be heard differently than I can be. Or when it's time for, to challenge something that is racist, it won't be me doing it, but it'll be a white person on staff who is fired up, and that's part of their anti-racism work, so that I'm not having to correct those things, but other white people are. So we're really strategic about that, but it's taken a long time. That's not something I'm like, you go and defend our, racial honor or whatever. It's very much like part and parcel with the work that we do, and like how we are often marginalized, as powerful as we are. Like we're marginalized because we're people of color led. And our staff is predominantly people of color, and not only people of color, but Black males of color. And and we're marginalized, and it's within our community of quote unquote practice. So calling that out, they really enjoy the white, and it's white female staff. They love going to meetings and pointing these things out, and like creating an atmosphere of accountability. And so I think those are ways. And then just the fact that we are so concentrated on employing people of color. So for me, it's not about, I love doing these webinars and find it really helpful, but also it's about the day-to-day employment. It's my staff drive, these young guys drive nicer vehicle than I do, and it's not about the materialism. It's the fact that they have a quality of life that is directly impacted and is improved because of this work. So that is what that's really what that's when the rubber hits the road. It's like the quality of people's lives, the fact that people have access to really good food and employment, and they can see they have more economic choices. I'd love for them to be saving up for like a mortgage payment, but young men, they want their cars. So, but they have that choice, and when they have court issues and they're constantly profiled and have to go to court all the time for like running through, doing a roll and stop at a stop sign. I have one staff member who is literally in court today because he did a rolling stop. You know, just is racial profiling. It's ridiculous. But the fact that we are conscious and aware of those issues, it's not like he's gonna, you know, not get paid for his time today. He can make up the time, you know, later this week. So just the realities,
Yeah. The DWB, driving while black. My brother actually stopped driving in Montreal and Quebec because he got pulled over almost every week. And it's only when talking to one of his, he used to play sports, teammates, talking about, you know, how it is to be stopped by cops because you're young, and then realizing that the white person couldn't relate. Like, no, that never happens to me. You realize at a very young age, like, no, this is not right. And it's just the reality, everyday life of people of color in this system. So Erika, thank you so much. I mean, I wish we had more time because the comments, the chat box is just flowing with questions. But people, rest assured, we will have more of these webinars. And if you have the chance to come in Toronto this spring, Erika and other Growing Power colleagues will come back to do a Dismantling Racism training. Thank you all for participating. I've put up the Food Justice Network meeting information because we will have a meeting right after to talk about other things that we can do in a Canadian context to bring about an equitable and just food system. So please, I will leave it up and take the phone number that works for your area. If your city is not there, you could always use Google Chat. So Google allows free calls in the US and in Canada if you have a Gmail account. All right. Thank you all so much, and we will share the video and the slides shortly after today. Thank you, Erika.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care. Bye, everybody.